Now, before we even get into this video, I have a question. How far can the Golden State Warriors go this postseason? Will we see them flame out like we've seen in the last 2 seasons? Or can they go for their 4th championship since 2015? Let's talk about it, man. Now look, the Golden State Warriors are back again, and they're shining. Even with the recent ankle injury that Steph Curry suffered, and Klay Thompson's slow return to form this year, this squad is positioned to make their deepest run in the postseason since their matchup with the Raptors in the 2018-2019 season. Since then, the Golden State Warriors have missed the playoffs 2 years in a row after an injury-filled campaign in 2020 and some tough play-in losses in 2021. But now, the Dubs are on the hunt for another title. I'd like to begin this conversation focusing on some of the positives that this team has to offer in this postseason. First off, the stars. Look at Curry, man. I mean, Steph Curry historically has always upped his numbers in almost every statistical category during the playoffs, with the only notable exception being assists. And that's because he's creating his own shot and shooting the lights out instead. If he manages to come back from this ankle injury without a hitch, this team has a real chance to win the West. Furthermore, having his co-star Klay Thompson back, as well as having Draymond Green running consistent two-man action plays for him and creating opportunities, and the strong ability of his supporting cast, we know that he's in a good position. We know what Steph Curry can do. There's nothing else I can say about Steph at this moment other than I'm excited to see what he's going to do in this postseason because I'm a humongous Curry fan. Let's talk about Klay Thompson, man. Despite missing over 900 days between the management of 2 gruesome injuries that have ended the careers of other players and dealing with minutes restrictions, as well as missing back-to-back games this season, surprisingly, Klay is putting up numbers that are statistically right in line with his career numbers. He's shooting splits of 19.3 points a night, 3.9 rebounds, and 2.7 assists, and that's without losing much of his defensive ability on the floor, and all of that's being done in around 29 minutes a night this season. Klay is a locker room guy, he's a face on the Warriors' Mount Rushmore, and he's the perfect second option to take some of the heat off of Curry, who's going to be doubled damn near every trip down the floor in most 7-game series. Next up, we got Draymond Green. You know, Draymond started this year off looking like a possible DPOY again, and he's an excellent vet that will hold the young guys accountable and fire up the team in moments they'll need a boost in the postseason. Despite this, he has regressed somewhat on the defensive end and looks a step slower since his injury. Regardless of the ups and downs of his ability, Draymond is a quintessential piece to the hard-nosed championship caliber identity that the Warriors sport night in and night out, and will raise the floor of the team's defensive ability through his toughness, fire, and leadership. I think this year's Warriors team is one of the most interesting and exciting young squads we've seen with a lot of promise, and they have the basketball dream development environment underneath vets like Steph, Klay, Draymond, Iguodala, and championship caliber coach Steve Kerr. There's some amazing promise in some of the young guys and NBA rooks that they have, such as Jonathan Kuminga, Jordan Poole, Moses Moody, even James Wiseman, who unfortunately we won't see until next season, but that's another video. Furthermore, I think they're in a great spot, and here's why. They have some excellent depth in guys who are already at or nearing an athlete's prime age. You know, Chris Chiozza is 26, Damian Lee is 29, Gary Payton II is 29, and Gary Payton is playing his most games ever in a season. Andrew Wiggins is 27, Kevon Looney's 26. I could go on, man, but what I'm trying to say here is that outside of the Warriors' vets and rookies, their main bench depth and supporting cast are all guys who are in a nice sweet spot in terms of athletic prime and league experience. It's a really good core to have and to be working with when trying to win a championship. I think guys in this age bracket are malleable, but they're not raw in the same way that rookies are. This team just clicks together perfectly, man, all the way down from the vets and the stars through the coaching staff, the bench depth, and the rookies. Everybody on this team has bought in, and you can see it night in and night out when you watch them on the floor. Speaking of buying in, let's talk a little bit about Jordan Poole. He's peaking at the perfect time. And not only that, but he looks like the perfect successor to Stephen Curry in seasons to come. His case has helped even more when you look at his pre- and post-All-Star numbers. Pre-All-Star, Jordan Poole was putting up 16.4 points a game, 3.1 rebounds a game, 3.5 assists a game, and that's on 44% field goal percentage, 34% from the three-point line, and 92% from the free throw line. Those are pretty strong splits, but when you compare them to his post-All-Star performance, you start to see why Poole is a quintessential piece to this team and why he'll be crucial in a deep postseason run. Post-All-Star, Jordan Poole is putting up 24 points a game, alongside 4.1 rebounds a game, 4.8 assists a game, and that's on 48% from the field, 43% from three-point, and maintaining his 92% free throw percentage. In year 3 of his career, Poole is not only a candidate and frontrunner for MIP and/or Sixth Man of the Year, this guy could be an all-star next season if he keeps this up. Jordan Poole is currently in a position to make a name for himself in the postseason. He's been proving that he can step in as a starter on any given night on the back of some incredible performances. This is worth thinking about. As good as he looks on the floor night in and night out, he's never been to the playoffs, and this is his first opportunity. This is the kind of guy the Warriors can rely on when the stars aren't getting it done or the supporting cast is having trouble. They need guys like this. I think it's a great fit. Now, all that gushing about the Warriors is probably a little bit of the Dubs fan in me, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. This is still a tough West, so I'd like to talk about some of the negatives and some of the things we need to consider if the Warriors are going to make a deep postseason run this year. Since Steph Curry's injury, and within the last month or so, the Golden State Warriors are 3-7 in their last 10, which is not great, especially since they've dropped some games to some very beatable teams that are not really in the same caliber as them, like the Wizards, the Spurs, Atlanta Hawks, Lakers, and even the Orlando Magic in the month of March. But Steph's been hurt, Klay doesn't really play back-to-backs, Draymond Green has been coming off of a minutes restriction. This is not a concrete picture of what a healthy, competitive Golden State Warriors squad would look like in the postseason, but it is something to consider. Another negative to consider is the mixed playoff experience, especially with this squad. Now, just bear with me, man. When Kevin Durant left to go to the Brooklyn Nets and the Dubs lost Klay to his first injury, the Warriors already faced an uphill battle in the 2019-2020 season. Then, 4 games into that season, Steph Curry broke his hand and the Warriors ended that year with the worst record in the NBA at 15-50. Then, when everything was supposed to come together for the following season, which was last year, Klay Thompson missed a second straight campaign after tearing his Achilles right as the season was about to begin. And although Steph Curry played like an MVP and set a new career high of 32 points per game to lead the league in scoring for that year, the Warriors failed to make the playoffs. I mean, yeah, they made the play-in tournament last year, but despite heroic efforts from Steph, the Warriors came up short in both games they needed to qualify for the postseason. Now, why am I bringing this up? This is my thought process. The last 2 years of Warriors basketball has entailed absolutely zero playoff basketball. Outside of the vets, a lot of the young Warriors squad has little to no playoff experience. Sure, regular season stats and regular season W's are one thing, but we all know playoff basketball is an entirely different atmosphere and a different game. There is very little room for error in a 7-game series, especially if this team is hunting a championship. Of course, this team is absolutely rife with vets chock full of playoff experience and a world-class front office and head coach in Steve Kerr, who has won 8 championships. So this team could definitely be in a worse position, man. However, guidance, advice, and shared knowledge between teammates is not the same as in-person playoff experience. So I think this year will be a real trial by fire for a good number of these young players on this squad. Furthermore, another thing to consider is the team and individual matchups in the West and how this could shake out in a 7-game series for the Dubs. A lot of NBA fans and media outlets have spoken about this weird phenomenon this year, in which the Western Conference is uncharacteristically the weaker of the 2 conferences this season. I mean, it makes sense, of course, between the buzz in the East that the concentration of stars there have caused, as well as the absolutely tragic Lakers season that otherwise might have been a challenge for teams to face if they had succeeded this year instead of failing. However, the West is far from safe for the Warriors, and there are some specific dangers I think they need to watch out for. It is very possible, as of right now, that the Warriors won't have Steph, or at least Steph to his full ability, in the first round of the playoffs. We might see minutes restrictions, we might not even see him at all in the first round depending on how this injury shakes out. And I think a Steph-less Warriors team in the first round is not nearly as secure as some Dubs fans would like them to be. What's even more is an injury to one of the Warriors' vets in the postseason could mean a swift end to the Dubs season in a tough West. Another concern of mine is we've seen throughout this season, the Warriors seem to have difficulty containing scoring bigs like Nikola Jokic, DeAndre Ayton, and Karl Anthony Towns, and that could be very problematic depending on what their matchups look like this postseason. The Dubs not really having a bona fide, effective big outside of Kevon Looney opens his team up to a lot of inside scoring and forces them to double opposing bigs to try and contain them, and that leaves a lot of gaps for opposing shooters to light them up. This forces more responsibility upon the shoulders of defensive-minded guys like Juan Toscano-Anderson, Gary Payton II, and even Jonathan Kuminga, and these guys can help turn the water off when opposing front courts begin to get hot. It will be absolutely crucial that these guys can keep the clamps on opposing scorers, especially on nights when shots aren't falling consistently for the Warriors. The Warriors' reliance on small ball lineups and their lack of a traditional 7-foot defensive anchor of a center might be their downfall in the postseason. It remains to be seen at this point, unfortunately. I've wrapped up all of the positives and the negatives that I think are going to impact this team going into the playoffs. So I'd like to explore some possible first-round matchups and my thoughts on what the playoffs might look like for the Warriors. It can be tough around this time of year to make predictions in who's going to play who, especially as seeding shifts so rapidly these days right before the playoffs begin. As they currently stand, I see 3 possible first-round matchups that I'd like to explore, with one of them being far more probable than the other 2, but I'm going to touch on all 3. The 3rd seed Warriors probably won't lose the 3rd seed, but if they do, they cannot drop lower than the 4th, meaning that their first round matchup looks most probable to be the Jazz. It could also be the Denver Nuggets, and I think there's a slight chance they could see the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I don't know if that matchup really happens. The general consensus that I've seen from Warriors fans is that they would like to see the Jazz in the first round between those 3 teams. They're not worried about the Jazz. I mean, no offense to Utah fans, I love Spada as well. No offense to Rudy Gobert fans. But the Warriors are up 3-1 on the Jazz this season. I have to give credit where credit is due. The Utah Jazz are top 10 this season in defensive rating. But the vast majority of their defensive effectiveness comes from inside the three-point line, mostly due to Rudy Gobert's greatness as a defensive anchor. When stretched out across the floor, about 46% of Golden State Warrior field goal attempts come from beyond the three-point line. Even more worrying for the Jazz is that almost 40% of Golden State Warrior points come from three-point makes. Steph Curry and company shoot and score from the three-point line more than almost every other team in the league this year. This is dangerous for the Jazz, as they've proven in past postseasons that their ability to defend the perimeter is questionable, and that might make an easy lunch for a hot-shooting Warriors team in a 7-game series. Here's another factor that puts the Warriors up on the Jazz in a first-round matchup. Around 16% of Warriors' scoring this season comes from opportunities created off of opponent turnovers. Furthermore, the Utah Jazz turn the ball over around 14 times a game this season, on average, and they're averaging giving up about 16.7 points off of turnovers per game this season. The Warriors take this matchup somewhat easily to me, between their arsenal of shooters, small ball scoring lineups that run defenses in circles, and large number of guys who can play at least competent defense against stars like Gobert and Mitchell. This is the matchup they want going into the first round, especially if they don't have a fully healthy Steph. That's my take on a Warriors-Jazz matchup in a nutshell. But there's another team that the Warriors could face depending on how seeding shifts that I think they want to avoid, and that's the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are a far different story than the Jazz to me, and they might be the most dangerous possible first-round matchup to this team. Denver leads the season series against the Warriors 3-1, and while they do heavily rely on Nikola Jokic to generate their offense, and they look a little bit out of gas coming towards the end of the season, at least in my opinion, we don't really know how healthy the Nuggets will be in the postseason, even with the slow return of Jamal Murray and the eventual return of Michael Porter Jr. Guys like Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, and the rest of their bench depth could help Jokic give the Dubs some trouble. I think this could be a dangerous series for a Warriors team that might not be fully healthy in the first and or second round, and it's a trap they want to avoid by avoiding slipping to the 4th seed. I don't know, man. Other NBA fans might disagree with me on this point, but I don't feel very good about a Warriors-Nuggets matchup in the first round for the Warriors. I think that's a long series with the possibility of going to 7 games, strictly due to Jokic's greatness and the uncertainty of Steph Curry's injury at this point in time. Now, there's one more matchup that I think is possible, but it probably won't happen, so I'll just lightly touch on it. The Minnesota Timberwolves seem like they're not leaving the 7th seed unless they win or lose all of their remaining games. They will most likely play the Memphis Grizzlies, so like I said, this series probably doesn't happen. But if it does, you never know. It could be a toss-up in the first round. The season series between the Warriors and the Wolves is tied 2-2, and the scoring prowess and offensive capability we've seen in guys like Anthony Edwards, D'Lo, and Karl Anthony Towns could give the Dubs some trouble if they're not fully healthy. I think the Wolves are middle of the pack this year, especially in terms of defensive and offensive rating. But the Wolves are a hungry, hard-nosed team with a new identity this year, and they can't be counted out of any matchup. To cap off this analysis of the Warriors, I'd like to make a bold prediction. My prediction for the Warriors postseason this year is that they make the NBA Finals. I think the Warriors' biggest competition this year, at least in the West, is of course the Phoenix Suns, who are playing the best basketball they've played in years and have just set a franchise record for wins in a season. Chris Paul's injury is not visibly limiting his performance in any way. Devin Booker is a prolific scorer who can get his team points in bunches, and DeAndre Ayton is a true defensive and scoring threat to a Golden State Warriors team that doesn't really have any formidable bigs that can stop a star big like Ayton. In the Western Conference playoffs this year, the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors are the teams to beat, and I'd love to see a matchup between the two teams in a tough 7-game series. That would be absolute must-watch TV. Other notable threats to a deep Warriors run that I can think of, at least off the top of my head, are the Ja Morant-led Grizzlies, who have been surging all year and have been performing exceptionally well even with Ja Morant sidelined. And furthermore, I think a Luka-led Mavericks team that currently leads the season series on the Warriors 3-1 cannot be counted out. Even if the seeding doesn't make for a first-round matchup between the Warriors and the Mavericks are not a team that I want to take lightly or count out in a matchup against the Warriors, specifically because you can never truly count out Luka Doncic. Now look, man, I could go on and on about these other Western teams, but this is a Warriors video, so I'm going to end it by restating my prediction. I think that this year, the Warriors are as good as anybody in the West and have one of the best chances in the last few years in a weaker than normal West to go all the way to another finals appearance if they play their cards right, maintain the health of their stars, and are fortunate enough to receive consistent and reliable play from the supporting cast night in and night out, as we've seen them do all season. So that's my pick, man. Call it a hot take, call it a safe pick. I'm picking the Golden State Warriors to make another finals appearance and be the team that makes it out of the West this year to challenge whoever comes out of the East for that championship. Can Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, and company win another championship? That remains to be seen, but one thing we do know is this will make for an absolutely explosive postseason that I cannot wait to watch and explore with all of you. This has been Attack the Rack, man, your one-stop shop for NBA commentary and basketball analysis. I've been your host, Zach. If you liked what I said this video, please drop a like on the video, and if you want to see more and be a part of this community as it grows, I'd love if you dropped a subscription on my channel. It helps my channel grow, and it gets this commentary out to other basketball fans just like you, people who love the game. Thanks for tuning in to Attack the Rack. This is your host, Zach, signing out. Until next time.